Steve, are we ready to go?
Stand by, I'm confirming. You are good to go, sir.
Could you grab my speaker in the back seat of my car? Bring it in. Thanks.
Oh, okay, there we go. All right, it's 6 o'clock, 6:01 actually. So I will call the meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Township Board of Meridian Township here in Michigan, October 6th. And with that, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And probably be best if we kind of more or less stay mute while I say it, because otherwise it gets crazy on the screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I heard all of you. You sounded great. Thank you very much.
Good.
Okay, we now come to the roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Supervisor Stika.
Here.
Clerk Dreyfus is present. Treasurer DeShane.
Here.
Trustee Jackson.
Here.
Trustee Opsimer.
Here.
Trustee Sunland.
Here.
Trustee Wazinski.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you so much. I believe we have no presentations this evening. Is that correct?
Correct.
Manager? Yes, okay.
No.
Is our legal counsel on at this point? He was going to be joining us. Maybe he has not gotten on yet. Okay, I just wanted to have him talk a little bit about our authority to meet. He and I have discussed that extensively. Let's just say at this point, we'll call on him later when he shows up, but I will indicate that he has said we do have authority to meet at this point. That is virtually meet. Moving on to citizens addressing agenda and non-agenda items, and I would ask Mr. Geeves for help with this.
Of course, if you'd care to make a comment in the Zoom interface itself, you can use the raise hand feature and we will enable your ability to speak. If you care to dial in using the telephone, we can take telephone comments at 517-349-1232.
Thank you very much. And again, if you do call in or you do raise your hand to be called on, you're limited to 3 minutes. We look forward to hearing from your comments. You start out by your name and address, and then go forward from there. We will time you and let you know when your time is up. And we ask that you be courteous, refer directly to the board and not to others. And anybody calling in, Mr. Geeves?
We have no raised hands and we have no telephone calls at this time, sir.
All right. We will. There is a second opportunity for citizens. If you were late or want to, there was another chance at the end of the meeting. We will now move on to Township Manager Report. Manager Walsh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Supervisor and Board. First thing I'd like to do is welcome Amber Clark. Amber is our new Director of Economic Development and Neighborhoods, and started with us last Monday. So this is her first official board meeting with us. And so I want to welcome her, and she's going to be a great addition to our team. Tomorrow, of course, is the long-awaited ribbon cutting for the marketplace on the green. 4 o'clock tomorrow. Hope to see you all there. I just hope while everyone's there, we remember all the people who were involved in putting this together. There were a lot of, let's say, back and forth, a lot of fundraising, a lot of people going out. It's not one individual or 2 individuals. It was a complete team effort. And I certainly appreciate everyone's work on that project. It's really something to be proud of for this community. And number one thing is it's beautiful, and number 2, it's cash, which is a great deal. I won't highlight the deer management work that's going on, and that's on the agenda, and Director Maisner will be able to update you on that. I did want to take a minute, although Walnut Hills is on the agenda. We've been working extensively on this for the last 7 to 10 days. We were in front of Judge Jamo's court last Wednesday, the Honorable Judge Jamo, who the question was, does the township, we were the defendant, the plaintiff was Summer Park Realty, does this township defendant have the right to take down the buildings under the dangerous building code? Judge Jamo didn't mince any words. He was very emphatic that yes, the township has a right and can do so after the October 5th deadline. And more to come on that, but I wanted to kind of set that up for your discussion later on. Roads were basically complete with our road program. The 16 miles of crack sealing will be completed by this Friday. I want to credit Deputy Manager Perry, who has done a great job overseeing that project for our first year of handling that. I think the biggest thank you, though, came from the county, who didn't have to do the work. Got a note from Bill Conklin today, who was just thrilled at the way the project looks and that he didn't have to oversee it or his team. One of the main parts of the township that's not completed yet is up in Shaw and Potter and Edison, an area that really needs the improvement and the work to be completed. We're working with the county because they're doing a big drain project up there. But the base paving of that area, it's been long awaited. We've been talking to the owners of Bluegill Grill about this project for 3 or 4 years. We expect the base coating of that project to be done by the end of this month. Solar, again, coming by the end of the month in 2 different areas at the marketplace and the South Fire Station. The HVAC project, another very large project for the township under the direction of Director Perry, will be completed by the end of this month. And so we will now have heating and air conditioning in our municipal building. The Copper Creek development, which is a large residential development up off of Hazlitt Road. Principal Planner Menser sent me a note today that the final design has been approved. So Copper Creek is moving forward. Hazard pay, that was about a $70,000 expense for the township. We've been reimbursed by the federal government for that. We have the check. I want to thank Brandy Yates, our communications department, for their work on the census. We're approaching 77%. We've had a great response, and the deadline has, I understand, through the courts has been extended to October 31st. So we're hoping to be in the very high 70s and approaching 80 before it's over. And finally, of course, we have 3 millage proposals on the ballot coming up in a month. The team worked together to put out some information. Obviously, we're not allowed to seek approval, seek yes votes, but we are allowed to put out information about them. And we did so, and it was a combination of about 7 or 8 of our leaders putting that together last week. That's kind of a little overview of what's going on with the team, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you have some throughout the evening. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you, Manager Walsh. Does anybody have any questions or concerns they want to raise with the manager at this point? Okay, I don't see any hands. I don't hear anyone. Okay, we'll move on then to the board member reports of activities and announcements. Any board members have anything to tell us about? Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you, Supervisor. The past couple of weeks, attended a few events. The first was on September 24th. I attended our community policing forum hosted by Chief Blaga and his very talented staff. It was very well put together, informative, good questions came from people that attended, and lots of very good information on our community policing policies. I think the most salient thing was the way the chief showed residents how they can look at any policy, any procedure, virtually anyone except for one such as responding to a bank robbery, but everything else that's available online for our citizens to view at any time. On September 26th, attended the Regional Electronics Recycling Day at Chippewa Middle School. September 30th, with Deputy Manager Perry, attended the wastewater recycling open house on Trowbridge Road, which is where all of our wastewater goes. The EPA director was there with some federal funds in hand that will be awarded to the state that will then trickle down to our wastewater recycling plant. And they're under a major renovation there, and it's really quite impressive place. And then lastly, October 3rd, this past Saturday, I was part of the tree planting day, which was made possible by this board by a $10,000 grant to the Environmental Commission. we turned around and bought hundreds of trees. That day in particular, we had 60 volunteers and 40 large trees that were planted. And if you've been by Kennewa and Okemos Road, it's a different look already, and you can only imagine how great it's going to look in 10 and 20 years from now. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Other board members? That's Trustee Wazinski. You're muted.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to Treasurer DeShane's report on the recycling event. Apparently, this was one of the biggest events that we've had to date. We recycled almost 90,000 pounds of electronics, filling 4 semi-trucks, and over 1,000 vehicles attended that event. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of heavy lifting. There's TVs that still weigh 300 pounds in people's houses. But to add to that, there was a tremendous amount of volunteers and a tremendous amount of turnout. So also want to thank Manager and the staff for putting out that letter that helps describe the proposals for the millages on the ballot. I've gotten a proposal about that. And I think that's really helpful. So if we can promote that as much as we can to help folks be informed in their voting, that'd be fantastic. And then a question for Manager Walsh. The marketplace on the green ribbon cutting, is that virtual only, or is that in person as well?
Yeah, it's my understanding that the township board and all of the directors are asked to be there. And also in addition to that, we have someone from each of the different entities that donated to the project to also be there. We want to keep our number somewhat down because of what's going on in the world. But yes, it's going to be Facebook and every other thing live so that people can watch. And I think Zoomed. Director Maisner is in this meeting under Deer Management, so she may know more about it than I do. But I think we're going to have about 40 or 50 people that'll be there. And Director Maisner is the MC of this event, and she knows more about it. So if there's any errors, maybe she can, what I said, she can fill it in. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Supervisor.
Members, Ms. Jackson?
Yes, since our last meeting, I attended a Tri-County Regional Planning Commission board meeting, and at that meeting, we approved the proposed budget for the 2021 fiscal year and the work plan for the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission. There's not much change from this year and what they plan to do to next year, and much of it is continuation of their general foci to this point. On the 29th to the 2nd, I also attended the 2020 Michigan Municipal League virtual convention, which I found was a real well-run virtual affair, and participated in several workshops and talks that focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion from the perspective of the state civil rights department. Community policing, focusing on the the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department, and COVID impacts and responses from the municipal level, focusing on, I believe it was Mount Pleasant. On the 4th, I attended the DDA meeting at the township. I also wish to commend the Chief Plaga and his department on their forum that was, I believe, held on the 24th. I found it very informative. Even though I claim to be a graduate of the Citizens Academy, I'm still learning things that I believe all citizens need to know and understand about how we operate and how we interpret the concept of community policing. And so thank you very much for that presentation.
Well, thank you for a good report. Anyone else want to make a report? If not, I will call on our attorney, Mr. Fahey. At the beginning of the meeting, I mentioned that there is some issues with regard to having virtual meetings. And I know that you have issued some advice to this board concerning that. And I was hoping you could give us that information, that advice at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I won't belabor this too much. Just some background, though. First of all, probably most of you have watched the news and saw that on Friday, the Michigan Supreme Court issued an opinion on the issue of the governor's executive orders. That opinion came up in a very unusual context. It didn't get to the court in the normal way. It got there because a federal judge asked the court for its opinion on two very narrow questions. The court gave the federal court its opinion on those questions, and the bottom line of that opinion was that the governor's orders, to the extent that they depended upon either the 1985 Emergency Management Act or the 1945 Powers of the Governors Act, did not contain sufficient authority for the governor to issue the various orders that she's issued since the end of April, when the legislature took issue with the governor's ability to go forward. So the actual impact of those rulings, though, is very unsettled at this point because of the way in which that came to the court from a federal judge. So it doesn't take effect in the normal way that we would expect a Supreme Court opinion to take effect. As we look at it, at a very minimum, it's going to not take effect for 21 days. After 21 days, there is going to be an opportunity for the governor to request a rehearing. And based on the news that's been coming out of the governor's office, I would expect that to take place. If that happens, it could well be that decision, the final decision that comes out of the Supreme Court may not happen until after the November 3rd election. It may not even happen until after they change in the personnel in the court on January 1. So I'm not going to try to predict what's going to happen. All I can tell you, all I know about that is that opinion is not effective yet. Apart from that, and I think this is probably more important for purposes of what we are going to do as a township going forward with respect to whether we hold these meetings in a virtual format. There is nothing in the Open Meetings Act that prohibits the township from conducting virtual meetings, whether there's a pandemic or not. It is obvious that over the years, most municipalities have held in-person meetings, and in many cases, that's the most convenient way to do things. These are not ordinary times, and it doesn't happen to be convenient nor safe for us to do that at this point in time. There is a sufficient amount of discretion and with a appropriate broad construction of the Open Meetings Act, I believe that even without the governor's orders, the township board has authority to conduct its meetings under these circumstances in a virtual format. Hopefully going forward, we will see the legislature adopt some legislation that clarifies that for us a little bit better. Because I will be the first to agree that not every single municipal attorney out there agrees with my opinion on this. But until we get additional clarification from either the court or the legislature or some other administrative body, such as the Department of Health and Human Services, at this point, my recommendation is that the township, if you are wishing to do so, and if you believe that it is necessary for the public health of Meridian Township, that you continue to conduct your meetings in a virtual format. Thanks. Any questions?
Well, we could save the questions for when we get to the attorney advice section of the meeting. I wanted you to speak early in the meeting because of the fact that there have been some people have questioned, do we or do we not have the authority to proceed tonight virtually? And that's why I thought up front rather than later in the agenda would be important, especially in light of the fact that apparently, at least initially, and it could have changed by now, see if things change constantly, the Township Association that we belong to was saying, no, you can't have virtual meetings. And yet the Municipal League, which we also belong to, was saying, yes, you can, just as you just did, at least for the rest of October. So
As of today,
our attorney to voice an opinion was important. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Fahey.
You're right. There are many others out there that disagree with each other about this. And I think we can all respect that. I know that the MTA tries its hardest to try to keep its members legally safe. But honestly, I think in this case, being legally safe is maybe less important than being physically and healthy safe.
Thank you. All right. Any more board member reports? Back to that, please. I don't see any hands. I did not make my report yet. I'll mention I did a few things that I think are worth mentioning. I attended something called the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research that MSU presents. They have an organization called that, and they present seminars or public forums periodically. And they had one on policing, and a very timely subject a couple of weeks ago on the 23rd of September. And it was actually the day before our own police forum. So I attended both of those. I also attended our police forum, which the public attended, and it was very well presented by Chief Blaga and several of his officers. They did a good job of presenting, and the public did not have, they had questions, but I think they left pretty well satisfied. And thank you, Chief Blaga, for that. I attended the EDC meeting on October 1st and the DDA meeting on October 5th, and also attended during the last couple of weeks several meetings and the hearing on Walnut Hills, which we'll hear more about later on in the meeting. Last chance for board member reports. Okay, we will now move on our agenda. And our next item is the approval of the agenda. And I will mention that I do not have in front of you tonight, item 12D, board and commission appointments. Several of the people that I wanted to bring before you, I either could not reach, or in one case they changed their mind about interest. So that'll be on the agenda for next time, 2 weeks from tonight. And we'll have a number of them for sure next time, 2 weeks from tonight. All right, without 12D, is there a motion to approve the agenda? Treasurer?
I move approval of the agenda as presented by the supervisor.
Is there a second?
Support.
Supported by the clerk. Any need to comment further on this? If not, we need to have the vote on it.
Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Trustee Jackson,
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer,
Yes.
Trustee Sunland,
yes,
Trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
Supervisor Stika,
Yes,
Clerk Dreyfus votes yes. Agenda is approved.
thank you. We now move on to number 9, which is the consent agenda. In this meeting, we have our communications. We have the minutes of 2 meetings, the September 15 virtual regular meeting and the September 22nd virtual special meeting. We also have bills, as well as the addition of a street light at Hagedorn and Mount Hope. And finally, the ratification of new part-time paramedic appointment. Is there a motion? Clerk Dreyfus.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Jackson. Any discussion or need to remove anything? If not, we need a vote, Mr. Clerk.
Trustee Jackson,
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer,
Yes.
Trustee Sunland,
yes,
Trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
Supervisor Stika,
Yes,
Clerk Dreyfus votes yes. Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
motion passes 7-0.
thank you very much.
Consent agenda passes 7-0.
Thank you. Our next item is questions for the attorney. Mr. Fahey is still with us. Does anyone have any questions either on what he discussed earlier or other matters that pertain to the board at this time? I see none. Looks like you're off the hook, Bill. All right.
Thanks again.
Move on to our hearings, but we have none tonight, which brings us to our action items. 12A of the action agenda is the planned unit development number 20014 at the Okemos Land Investment, Silverleaf. Mr. Gieselbach, would you like to give us a quickie on this, please? You're muted.
You discussed this at your last meeting and held a public hearing also on this. This is a planned unit development on the north side of Bennett Road. 150 residential units are part of this. You'll remember this as a rezoning, and a number of the conditions were placed on this as how this property would develop as part of those. And those are included in the conditions with the planned unit development. The Planning Commission did also hold a public hearing and recommended approval of this development.
And with regard to this item, Trustee Jackson.
I will read the motion as soon as I find it.
I understand totally.
I move to adopt the resolution approving plan unit development number 20014 to develop 150 detached single-family residential lot on approximately 94 acres located on the north side of Bennett Road, west of Hewlett Road.
Is there support?
Support.
Supported by, well, I think I heard Mr. Opsimer, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, do you want to comment on this, Trustee Jackson?
I would only add to Mr. Kieselbach's description that within this resolution, we identify conditions that were placed on the rezoning of this property that involve the treatment distribution of land to be assigned to the township and made a part of the, I'm not sure what the decision has been made about how that'll happen, but the conditions also involve access, the kinds of access from Bennett Road to this property, and how the layout of this Silverleaf development will relate in many respects to other developments in the area.
Does anyone else want to talk about this motion that's before us? I see no other hands. I guess we're ready to vote on this, Clerk Dreyfus.
Trustee Opsimer,
Yes.
trustee Conlon,
yes,
trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
Supervisor Stryker,
Yes.
Clerk Dreyfus votes yes. Treasurer DeShane,
yes,
trustee Jackson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. We now move on to 12B, which is the enhanced for 2020 and 2021. It goes over. Enhanced Deer Management Program. Would someone like to make a motion on this? And then we'll have Luann talk about it. Mr. Opsimer.
I move to support implementation of the Enhanced Deer Management Program for the DNR 2020 archery season beginning October 1st through January 1st, 2021, with inclusion of additional staffing and support, as well as the addition of supplemental firearms programs staffed by our police department from January 1st through March 15th, 2021.
Support.
Is supported by Trustee Wazinski. comment, Mr. Oh, well, let's hear about from Luann about the program and then and any of her staff that she wants to call on. Luann?
Okay, no, it's just me tonight. Thank you Supervisor Stika and board. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. At the last meeting, we talked about different ideas of what we could do to hopefully harvest more deer this year. And so let me just go through some of the things that we have done already is we did purchase a cooler, an outdoor cooler to store the deer. I'm happy to report that the program started on October 1st and we have 20 deer taken already. So it's been a great start for us. And I really think that the reason for that is that we've been really trying to help the hunters on the end of all the work. I mean, they like to go out for the fun, but then the work part kind of plays into whether they take a shot or not. And so by having that cooler there, we are transporting the deer to the processor, which is in Jackson. And Sportsmen Against Hunger is funding the processing of that meat. And then it will go to the food banks in Okemos and Hazlet. And so with us transporting the deer and having the cooler, it's made a huge difference. And I think their excitement to be out there and actually take a lot of those deer. And so we also sent letters to property owners of 5 acres or more. I think I talked about that at the last meeting. We've had 17 properties take advantage of that. So that's positive, very positive for us. And then also Delta Dental and then Ingham County property on Dobie Road is participating as well as Lake Lansing, where the land preserve is. So, and then when the police program starts, then we'll have our own DPW staff help with field dressing the deer and actually bringing it to the cooler and then off to the processor. So anyway, I think all of these things that we've done so far have been really positive. And to take 20 deer already, I think that's more than we've done in previous years. So I'm very excited about our good start that we've had.
Discussion, Trustee Opsimer.
Yes, so Director Maisner gave a good overview of the program before us. I just want to thank her and Chief Plaga again for all the work that went into this. And when we talk about harvesting, 300 deer, that is nearly doubling our best season, which is really an outlier. So we're effectively tripling what we do on most years. So it is a sizable and meaningful expansion of the program if we're successful. And I would just again encourage staff, if there are additional costs that we do incur, or if there's additional ideas for expanding, to bring those to the board, because I think we're very interested in them, especially with the limitations that we've been presented with chronic wasting disease and baiting. Luann, my only question, we talked about this at the last meeting. Have you and your staff given any additional consideration to the need for testing the deer? I don't know if that would occur prior to them going for processing, or if that would occur at the processor.
Yes, actually, we've been working really closely with the DNR and the 2 Chads at the DNR, Chad Stewart. And, they feel pretty comfortable. Well, I don't want to speak for them, but we have not really had a case in, I believe, 3 years that they've found in our community of CWD. And the testing is a little different this year. There's less of it. And they're actually not starting with any of the testing of the deer until firearm season. So we feel comfortable moving forward without having the testing, since there have not been any deer, I believe, in 3 or 4 years that have tested positive in our community.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's all I have.
Treasurer DeShane.
Dr. Mason, I want to thank you for bringing back to us this revised and enhanced deer management program. The need for deer management has never been more apparent than it is this year in Meridian Township. Our deer population has soared. It's become a public health issue, and great start. Five deer a day. You're averaging right now, 4 a day for the first 5 days. You keep that up, you'll break the 300 and you'll get to 360, hopefully. That plus the sharpshooter activity in January and February maybe put a dent in this very severe problem, but it is a problem. Deer are very cute and people like to see them, but they do present a public health risk, not to mention the gardens that they devastate, and the traffic hazard they pose to the township. And their numbers have skyrocketed the past couple of years. We all see it all the time in our neighborhoods. So thank you for bringing this back to us. And as Trustee Opsimer said, I'm confident this board will provide you with additional funding should the need arise to help out these hunters. I'm really glad we're enabling them, giving them the fun part, and us doing the back end work. But they're out there. Today wouldn't have been bad, but November won't be so pleasant up there in those tree stands, or December, and they're out there doing that for us, and we're very grateful for those hunters. Thank you.
Right, and there was one thing that I forgot to mention. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted here. Is that we have Mike Ellis, who's part of our DPW staff, who's been involved in our deer management program from the beginning. And he has really taken an active role this year with helping us with transporting of the deer, with making sure the cooler gets cleaned. And, some of those, and then if there's deer stands that are found in our parks and land preserves that are private and not part of our program, he will take care of tagging those and then eventually removing them. So it's so helpful to have additional support on some of these nuts and bolts things from our own staff. So I applaud our own DPW staff for assisting and having some excitement toward making this all happen and work more smoothly, and hopefully encouraging more of our hunters then to get out there a little more often, because we're going to help with all the other stuff that's not so much fun.
Further discussion from board members. Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you. I also want to commend Director Maisner. This is a big undertaking. I know it has been in the past, and you've just doubled it. I know we received a concern from a resident about two things. One of them said, that we shouldn't be considering nuisance or our gardens and such as a promotion for this program. And I just want to reiterate, that's not where I think this board is truly coming from, and that what Treasurer DeShane had mentioned is we do look at it as a public health threat. And I was wondering if Chief Plaga could maybe explain a little bit about the safety and the roads and what you do see and what you do know about the public safety aspect of the deer management here in Meridian.
Sure, Trustee. I would share with you that car deer accidents are one of the major things that we deal with on a regular basis. One of the other things is you look at the car deer numbers, and the corridors are the areas where we have high number of accidents. Grand River Avenue between Powell and Marsh Road is really one of the highest areas of car deer accidents, but a lot of those go unreported. Our folks from DPW who go out and actually remove deer from the side of the road, they'll be removing deer from locations you don't see accidents occurring. We have injury accidents. Inexperienced drivers swerve to miss deer and can be involved in crashes involving trees or other inanimate objects or other vehicles that cause damage and injury. So reducing the number of those car deer accidents is definitely a public safety concern. And I think this program is a step in the right direction to getting a better handle on that issue.
Thank you. Thank you. And one more question for Director Maisner. When you say that the folks they're taking the deer to the processor, does that mean that hunter actually takes that meat home to eat? And this is coming from a vegetarian, but are we just throwing away that meat?
No, what is happening is during CWD, if the hunter, whatever they shot, was their responsibility to have it processed and they could eat it, well, first they would have to take the head to be tested with the DNR. And then they were responsible for actually taking their deer to a processor or processing it themselves and then keeping that meat, or they would donate it to maybe friends or family. And so once they had one or two under their belt, they weren't as motivated to go out and hunt any longer because they had all the meat that they could have, and there was a lot of work involved. Now what's happening is we are transporting the meat to the processor, and then we are taking all of that meat and donating it to the food banks. So nothing is being thrown away. We are requiring the hunters to shoot one doe for us before they can shoot a doe for themselves. So hopefully that encourages at least 2 per hunter. And I think we have 75 hunters, so that would get us to our 150 like that, you know? So, I don't know, I feel really good about our season. It started out really well so far. Our hunters are so excited just to see the extra effort, I think, being made on their behalf. And I think they're working a little extra harder for us too.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Clerk Dreyfus. You're fine.
I have been around since the beginning of the deer management program and of course before that when we didn't have one in place. And what I'm really impressed about is that when I see where the enhancements have been now, it really shows that there's not just a list of certain things like accomplishments and what your goals are, but what I really see is the depth and breadth of the thinking, the creative thinking. It really is expanded, really thinking outside the sort of like in a, one monolithic thinking, and you're really looking at the impact, the idea of expanding to sending the letters to private over 5-acre property owners, different things that you're doing shows expanded thinking. And that's what I'm personally most happy to see. Everything is usually evolving and growing like a website. So the deer program is similar. It keeps evolving and growing. I think it's going to be very successful this year. Even if it didn't hit the full 300, it probably will. But even if it didn't, it's certainly showing the right activities and the right mindset to keep us moving forward. I think most residents are really happy with it. There's always going to be a few that are upset with it for their own personal belief systems about animals and other things. And overall, it's going to improve the safety for all the reasons, obviously, we deal with here. There is something to be said, though, and I do want to make this point. Everybody knows this, but I think if you're listening, it's still important to be said that living in a community like ours, killing deer is only one part of it. We should be careful about the plants that are planted around the properties and things like hostas and other things. Deer-friendly plants just help to attract more and more deer regardless. So you can get DNR resources and local resources on how not to plant those things. And also it's unwise, maybe potentially illegal, I think if we change the ordinance, to feed deer and encourage deer as well. So that's the other side of the equation, the deer management program. And I would encourage Home TV to continue doing educational programs about what residents can do to help do their part to reduce the impact of deer in the community. Thank you for what you've been doing.
Thank you, Clerk. Ms. Jackson, you had your hand up.
Yes. I do support this program. I also commend the Parks group for the changes they have made to amplify their effort and to improve the program. But I still find that there's some people in the community who are not familiar with it. And so I'd like to emphasize or have Ms. Maisner emphasize some of the basics and fundamentals. I think you've already mentioned that this year's goal is 300 deer. And I think someone mentioned that there's 75 hunters participating in the program this year. And there are actually 2 programs this year, I get that, and expanded. These food banks, I've read Hazlitt and Okemos food banks are recipients of this food source. Are these private food banks or are these food banks run by the township? I'm not familiar.
Yeah, they're operated through like Okemos Community Church and Hazlitt Community Church.
Great, thank you. And the another question that I've encountered is what are the conditions under which the hunt occurs, either on public land, and so these hunts are occurring in our parks and our land preservation properties primarily.
Correct.
Yes. At a certain time of day, or in the daytime or at night? Or
Typically they're out at dawn and at dusk. So it's
Okay.
morning and then evening, but not much during the day.
Okay, and that's probably the same condition that will occur from January to what, March, when the actual police department is working with firearms to cull the deer?
I'll let Chief Plaga respond.
So that is not the same conditions. We will be working under similar parameters as what the USDA was doing when their sharpshooters were taking deer off of public land.
Mhm.
We will be working, in park and natural areas. We'll also be considering working with private landowners, neighborhood, if the associations agree. We would need more than one or two contiguous property owners if the properties are small to be able to go in and do these things. We'll be doing them at night with specialized firearms there's no such thing as a silenced firearm, but they're suppressed. They make much less noise than a regular firearm, and the conditions must be right for us to be able to do it safely. Myself and staff have been meeting with the sharpshooters to make sure that our procedures and methods that we take in that January to March are the best and safe practices that are out there. But it will be done some of it will be done after dark hours, because that's really, that's when the deer are out moving and we'll be able to see them and get in close proximity and do it humanely. It's not necessarily a hunt when we'll be doing it, because the hunters in the program have to follow all the DNR regulations. We'll be receiving a special permit from the Department of Natural Resources, or we're going to be applying for one, and we'll have certain rules we have to follow, but we'll be able to, hunt outside of those hours during dark. And there's a few other things that we'll be able to do that a hunter in the program would not be able to do.
And my last question, are there any, is there any signage or other ways besides through the homeowners associations to let the communities, particularly near these private properties, know that this is going on during this period?
Right. So any of the properties that are in our program, outside of the private properties who have just hopped on board, there's signage at every entrance to those properties. And then the hunters also have a placard that goes on their dashboard. So when they show up and there's a car there, it clearly states that he's what they're there for, and they're part of this program. Property owners who are adjacent to the properties being hunted have all received a letter from the township informing them of what's happening. Our hunters also have to check in every day before they go out, or when they arrive to hunt at a spot. They also check out every day. And so we keep records of who's hunting, how many times, for how long, and how many deer that they take. And that's another way that we can identify, do we have a hunter who's out 7 days a week? And then maybe there's only somebody who's going once a week. Well, that once a week person, then we might supplement their site with another hunter to make sure we're maximizing our hours and our properties with our hunters. And so, yeah, we work really hard to make sure that everyone's communicating. They're communicating with us on a regular basis. I think Jane Greenway was involved a lot over the weekend with, if someone needs help tracking the deer, they can go on the Facebook page and other hunters will help them with that. But yeah, it is very highly managed, and all of our hunters have gone through a proficiency test. They've come through I can't think of the word that I want, but we work through like what our goals are of the program, what are the safety precautions, and orientation. And a whole orientation of what this program is. Many of our hunters have been with us from the beginning, and there is a brotherhood and sisterhood, because we do have some women hunters as well, who are very protective of this program. They want to make sure that everything goes well too. So it's all pretty much self-policed, and it's really a one-of-a-kind program. And it has put us in contact with a portion of the community that we really haven't had that much of a connection with. We're big with families and young children and sports programs and special events and those kinds of things. But these people feel like they really are contributing to the betterment of our community.
Thank you. I appreciate your willingness and openness to explain all of that to those of us who are not hunters and have no idea how it operates and where it goes. And so thank you very much.
Any other board members? I'll make a few comments. I know that there are people that are really concerned because, this is wildlife that's here in the community and they don't like to see us taking the deer. But, a number of things have been mentioned here that are very important. There's the safety that the chief mentioned in terms of automobiles and passengers and accidents. There's also a community benefit, though, on the plus side, because the food banks, people who are in need of protein are going to get it in part because of this program. But there's also the fact that in the wild, there are predators that maintain the deer population and a population that's healthy for the deer. Wolves and other predators will take deer, and usually that keeps the population at a level where the deer don't go hungry. There's the right number of deer for the environment. And that's gone when you get into a township like Meridian with the residences that we have. And so the deer, just by their nature, start eating all of our vegetation, et cetera, whether we're gardeners or florists, so to speak, because they have nowhere else to go and there's no predators keeping their numbers down. So we become the predators by default, whether or not we live in a society where that's necessary for us. It's necessary in the long run for the deer. And it's a sad thing to say, but it's true. So I think there's a lot of reasons, good reasons for this program. We got to keep the deer population under control. It's working extremely well. And I think these new ideas, the new things that are proposed that we're voting on here today are going to make it even a better program. And the last thing I want to mention is that with regard to the food banks, the Okemos and the Haslet community churches run those food banks, but they're supported by other churches and other organizations throughout the community. I'm not in either of those churches, but the church I belong to gives a lot of money towards those food banks. And I know that other groups, social groups, fraternal groups, they also do. So there's a lot of community involvement in getting that food out there, whether it's the deer meat or other forms of sustenance. So anyway, all right, is there anything else? If not, we'll have a vote. Clerk Dreyfus.
Trustee Sunland,
Yes.
trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
Supervisor Stika,
Yes.
Clerk Dreyfus votes yes. Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
trustee Jackson,
Yes.
trustee Opsimer.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, clerk. All right, now we move on to 12C, the 2020 third quarter budget amendments. And we want to have a motion on this. Treasurer DeShane.
I move to approve the third quarter 2020 budget amendments with a decrease in the budgeted fund balance for the general fund in the amount of $29,510, which projects a use of fund balance of $2,223,690. Based on 2019 results, the projected fund balance at December 31st, 2020 will be $8,270,729.
Support.
Is there support for that? Support by trustee Jackson. Miriam, our esteemed finance director, would you like to explain this for us, please?
Sure. So what you have before you is the third quarter budget amendments. We're requesting the use of the 29,510 additional. There's quite a few. You've got 3 pages worth of items. A lot of them are just items that we needed to kind of clean up. A lot of the things were already recognized when we brought you the 2021 budget. On the revenue side, we're adding back some administrative fees for the tax. We've received a couple of the CARES grants, so there's some revenue there. But we also have to recognize the loss of revenue on a lot of our programs. Since with the COVID-19, we have not been able to have a lot of our programs. So we're reducing the anticipated revenue with all of our programs. And then you'll see that offsets on the second page of your exhibit under the recreation piece of that, where we've lowered all of those anticipated expenses also. So those revenues are offset with the lowering of those anticipated expenses. There's a couple items on here. Have asterisks that have already been approved by the board. But we just needed to add them into this, what the redevelopment ready, the small business grants, and then also the deer management program. We've added the costs in with that also. If you have any more questions on any of the other items, I'd be happy to answer any of those.
Anyone have any questions on this? Or want to make any statements or arguments for or against? Trustee Wazinski.
Miriam, Director Madison. So when we have a lower than anticipated budget, is that lower than anticipated for FY21, or is that a result of FY20? And do we expect those to go back up once we are COVID safe?
So for the revenue side, for the recreation programs, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, this is just 2020 anticipated revenues. We do anticipate the programs to start back up, you know, with the changes in COVID. So this is just what we expect for the 2020 fiscal year.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. I would mention that unless I'm not finding something, it looks like the program fees that we did not receive are all related to the athletics and the student type recreation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Manager Walsh.
Yeah, one other piece of information, in fairness to Director Maisner's department, yes, we've had a huge setback in our revenue for Parks and Rec, but we also at the same time had an elimination of a position in that department in recreation. So there's been a huge offset to the loss in revenue, and that's why you're not seeing big numbers. To Trustee Wazinski's question, it's a good one. We don't know what 2021 is going to bring for the revenue for the parks, but keep in mind that position we don't plan to fill going into 2021. So there is the offset there. And Director Mazur's department has been hit hard staffing here for a variety of reasons in the past 90 days. And one other side note, when you look at this budget amendments, keep in mind, and I'm sure all of you already know this, but it's worth reminding you that a significant portion of the use of fund balance comes from a $2.2 million HVAC project. That's once that's eliminated, then the budget looks extremely good. So just a reminder on that.
Which is part of the reason why it's great to have a good fund balance. Treasurer DeShane.
I want to commend the manager and Director Maisner and all of our department heads for keeping this to just a $29,000 increase in the fund balance. The note in here, we also have our Meridian redevelopment money, $129,000 of small business grants that were included in that. So keeping this in this COVID year, only a $29,000 hit to our fund balance is good, because there's a lot of important expenses in here, and this board knows how important it was that we do what we could to help small businesses. And so we awarded those grants a few months ago, and we may need to again. We're not out of this yet, as we all know.
All right. Anyone else? Trustee Officer.
I think this question would be for Treasurer DeShane, but I do see under the general fund revenue, $20,000 as an increase in interest, and then under the special revenues fund, which is the road projects, $80,000 in interest. Was that just conservative budgeting initially, or have we experienced some change in interest rates?
no, it was a conservative budget estimate to start off with. And the first quarter of the year, we did very well as we did all of last year. Those rates have now fallen to the floor. We were getting 2%, we're now getting 0.2%.
Okay,
The road interest is, fortunately, we locked those in before the rates fell through the floor as well. And those were expected revenues from those. Remember that we are limited by those due to our bonding authority. We can't make more money than we pay in our bonding. So arbitrage limits us to how much we can earn on those. Those rates have all been locked in.
okay, thank you. And my only other question is, the federal grants, I believe it's all comprised under the second line item under revenue, which is listed as other federal grants, 105,000, and a number of them have been alluded to, but can we get a full rundown of what grants are in there and just what the general purpose is?
Yeah, there's 2 of the CARES grants that are in there. It's Manager Walsh referenced it earlier that we had received our hazard pay reimbursement from the CARES. I believe that was 69,000. And then there's also the other second CARES, which was to replace the CVTRS payment for the month of September. So those are the 2 numbers that are in there. And I think the CVTRS was $33,000.
Okay. So basically statutory revenue sharing and hazard pay reimbursement.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Manager Walsh.
Yeah, 2 other things just real quickly that the board should be aware of. One is that the budget's been adopted at the state, and we've seen the revenue sharing numbers, and we will be getting the 300,000, roughly 300,000, that was not included as a revenue source in your 2021 budget. So the additional cost of the solar and some other things that the board chose to put in that budget have all been covered by that revenue sharing that we'll receive back. So right now you can estimate your fund balance at around 7.8 million for 2021. It's been restored back to where it was. And the second note that's really worth noting in that several department heads, namely Chief Hamill and Director Madison, and I believe Chief Plaga may be involved in this, is that we have submitted for reimbursement through the CARES Act, and that request is between $700,000 and $800,000, $700,000 to $800,000 that we've asked for reimbursement for costs through COVID and all that. We will have an answer in the coming weeks, couple months on that, and that could also have a significant impact on our budget going forward in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I think we're ready to vote. Clerk Travis.
Trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
Supervisor Stika,
Yes.
Clerk Dreyfus votes yes. Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Trustee Jackson,
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer,
Yes.
Trustee Sunland.
Yes.
Budget amendments passed 7-0.
Thank you. We're now ready to move on to our discussion items. We have 2. The first one is the Walnut Hills area, discussion 13A. And want to mention that, we had been taking action to force the landowner to take down the various buildings, which have proven to be a nuisance with people going into them, the closed buildings, a real abandoned building problem. But there's been some new developments there, which really what this is really going to come down to is whether or not we are willing to, as a board, at least by consensus, be willing to delay taking those buildings down, at least some of those buildings, for another couple of weeks until our next meeting. And I'll let Manager Walsh fill us in.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. This is an issue that we've been working on obviously for years, and especially in the last months, but even more so in the last 2 weeks. There was a deadline to remove several of the buildings, namely Clubhouse, Pool, and others, by October 5th. That decision was taken to Judge Jamo's court last Wednesday. As I mentioned before, the decision was upheld in short order by Judge Jamo that we had the right to move forward by the board instituted deadline of October 5th. We're obviously now one day past October 5th, but in the last 7 to 10 days, we've been in discussions, not negotiations, with a local family who has ties all the way back to the local schools for the last 20 years. They own a business in the community as well. And when I first heard about this, I was very skeptic because of the timing of all of this. We want to save the clubhouse and all of that. So I've had probably 15 or 20 conversations with the family. And as you know, some of you had an opportunity to meet the family and listen and hear them out. This is a real deal. They are serious about going forward and purchasing the 193 acres. They have a purchase agreement signed with Summer Park Realty. They have 30 days to do their due diligence. So the question before you this evening is a rather simple one. Is the board willing to provide until your next meeting on the 20th? Are you willing to direct staff to hold off, because we do have a bid to demolish the clubhouse. The bid is from Michigan Demolition, a very reputable company, and the cost is about $300,000. We could move in next week and make that happen. The question before you tonight is, do you want to delay staff in forcing the October 5th deadline and giving the family 2 weeks to do their due diligence and have a report back from staff at your October 20 meeting? That's the decision that is in front of you as a policymakers, or are you going to direct staff? We've been through this for a number of years. Everyone's had months and years to work this out, and now we're October 5th, and here we are still discussing what might happen. I want to credit Director Kieselbach and Principal Planner Menser, because our counsel, Matt Kushel, who did a great job in front of Judge Jamo last week. They have put in an incredible amount of time to get us to where we are today, and that should not go unnoticed. So that's the question before you, Mr. Supervisor: a 2-week hiatus until October 20th, or are you directing staff tonight to move forward immediately? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I mentioned that it appears that if there's no glitch, there's going to be a purchase of this property by, as Manager Walsh said, a local person or persons who want to build single-family residences, just a few, not 300, on the property, and that we will know that by our next meeting, whether that's going to proceed. But they do want, as part of the purchase, they are looking forward to using existing clubhouse structure and maybe some of their outbuildings next to it for their purposes in terms of building new buildings. So if they in fact move forward, we would end up with the result we want, just differently. Otherwise, we can be stubborn and go forward tomorrow with knocking them all down. Trustee Opsimer.
Yes, I would concur, or I would express my support for having staff delay any action or enforcement of the order that we have in place to demolish the clubhouse and the pool for the time being until our next meeting. That would allow the family the time that they need to pursue their due diligence. I would only just caution that, part of the conversation that we had with the family earlier today is about how you go about securing, especially the clubhouse. The pool, there is a solution where you could cap it with structure, but the clubhouse is going to be a problem, and this might prolong the issues that we have there to some extent. But the family did seem much more creative in coming up with solutions, and they would be much more present on the site than the current owner. And so that should help alleviate that. And, if they, I think once they put windows into it, if it comes to that point, then they're going to have a huge financial interest in making sure that the site is properly secured and protected. Because once those windows go in, they would have a huge cost if there was any damage. So those are my thoughts on what the board should do at this time.
Trustee Sunland, you had your hand up?
Yes, I agree that we should delay a little bit. We're only talking about, we're going to delay to October 20th meeting. But I think that we should support this, the potential owners of this property and what they want to do.
Very good. Also, we had the treasurer and then we had the clerk.
Would agree with Trustee Sunland that we should delay this for at least the 2 weeks. And for no other reason than $300,000 is a huge cost to tear the old building down. And like that it might be repurposed and used rather than demolished seems to be the best use of resources. I do have a question for the chief though. What kind of calls are you getting for that location? Is it as bad as it right now as it was this past summer? Or is it quieted down a bit out there? We haven't heard much about what's going on up there, but we haven't asked about it either. So can you give us an update on the kind of vandalism calls or other issues you might be having on that property right now?
Well, I think with the activity, the house was taken down and some of the other structures were removed, which has had, legitimate activity on the property, which has reduced the amount of calls that we've had out there. When you have people out there, eyes and ears out there working, actually doing something, that keeps the people that are going to go out there and do something away. Also, you've taken away some of the buildings that they utilized for vandalism, breaking and entering. So we've had a reduction, but it's hard to tell if that's just because there's fewer people going out there or if it's because there's been people on the property actually working and coming and going.
Okay, thank you.
And then the clerk's office.
Thank you. Thank you. In the past meetings, I had questioned the owner about the clubhouse. My concern, I went along with the order for demolition for us to continue for the order of demolition. But the one I was most concerned about was the clubhouse. I do believe in a sustainability concept. You don't want to knock down viable buildings if you can rehab them, retrofit them, and otherwise keep things out of a landfill and out of a waste stream. So the clubhouse, I thought, was quite a useful building, and vandalism shouldn't have been the only reason that we wanted to order that building to be knocked down. But I knew that it looked like there was no other way, apparently, because of the way circumstances were playing out. So I wasn't real thrilled with the idea of having to knock down the clubhouse. Seeing that there's an offer on the table for a private person, private entity to put up maybe 3 or 4 buildings of their own, which will, remain to be seen, and then to preserve probably a large tracts of the land, and then to redo the clubhouse is a fantastic, almost, one of those very unexpected positive news, that we didn't do any work to get something like that to come in our hands. So we absolutely should not even have to pressure for 2 weeks is kind of arbitrary. As long as the deal's going through, I'm sure that the way it's going to move is the clubhouse will be safe and secure, probably from vandals in the future with the new owners as well, since it's going to be their own personal private property that they care about and just invested, a large sum of money in. So definitely look forward to, having them maybe join and welcome to Meridian Township. And we can certainly wait on any enforcement of building demolition.
And just so you know, from the conversation with the purchaser, 2 weeks works fine for them. Other board members? Okay, I think we have yes, Trustee Opsimer.
No,
Jackson, sorry. You're right at top of each other. Go ahead, Trustee Jackson.
I really have nothing different to add to the conversation. I do support the what appears to be the consensus to delay any township action on the order to remove the building in hopes that that these owners will come up with a great idea that allows them to preserve that asset on the property. I do hope, though, and as they develop their own plans, that they remember how much this property means to the whole township, partly because of its proximity to one of our preserves and other historical considerations of the value the township takes in how this property is managed.
Trustee Absamer, you had.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one other thing to the discussion. Actually, two other items. So there is a hypothetical based on the conversation with this family who presently lives here in the township, that they may actually want the clubhouse demolished and to start over, but still purchase the site and develop it with a similar concept. I think that's probably very unlikely. They do have, being a local family living in the township, they are very familiar with the history of the site. And so in all likelihood, they'll want to preserve it, but they're doing cost estimates, and that's really what the 2-week time frame is. So no one should be surprised if that very unlikely scenario were to occur. I just want to make sure no one is surprised by that. And then the only other thing that I would just add, so that everyone's eyes are wide open, especially the neighbors who live adjacent, with the consent agreement that we have in place through the mediation in the courts. There was going to be 50% open space plus the wetlands and other land that can't count towards the 50% open space. And that was going to be basically deeded to the homeowners association. And that would have been public land that, even though you're not, if you're on Skyline or the Greens or Heritage Hills, you're not in that HOA, but no one's really going to ask you which neighborhood you live in if you're utilizing and walking that open space. With this concept and with this model, if this private transaction occurs, which is not within the control of the township, it would all be a private estate. So likely they're not going to want trespassing. And there obviously is a culture of residents using that land. Even when it was an active golf course, they cross-country ski on it. They would walk probably all 4 seasons, people would walk on it. So everyone just needs to understand that with this, there is a loss to the community as well as a benefit. So there's pros and cons. Thank you.
Are you back, Mr. Supervisor? I know that he was having some problems with Zoom. I think he's trying to get back on. He's frozen. I don't know if Trustee Opsmer, you want to just finish up with this issue?
Yes, we can. Are there any other questions or comments on this act or this discussion item 13A? Treasurer DeShane?
I think it should also be noted that another loss this is to East Lansing schools, that we're looking at these new homes as being an infusion of students in that part of their school district. So anything like this, there are benefits and costs. And so I agree with Clerk Dreyfus. This is kind of the ideal outcome to preserve so much of this open green space, which is what the surrounding neighborhoods built their homes around, and much of that will be enhanced. But there are also downsides to it, and mentioning the fact that's been public space, but now will not be public space for walking, also is relevant. So overall, I think it's a very good development, but there are costs to it, and we need to be aware of those.
Manager Welsh, could you speak really briefly to the conversation that you've had with the school district?
Yes, and that's a valid point. It was raised by trustee Opsimer this morning. Before I even spoke publicly about this on Monday morning, I did contact the neighborhood and I did contact the superintendent, Dory of East Lansing Schools. I did receive a response back from her, and she was very appreciative of knowing the current situation and potentially the future condition of Walnut Hills.
Thank you, Manager Welsh. Supervisor Steicher, are you with us?
Mike's off.
I am now.
All right, we are still,
left.
we're still on 13A Walnut Hills discussion. So go ahead and continue leading us through this.
We reached, yeah, I assume we've reached a consensus. I had not heard anybody say anything negative. And the last person I heard was Mr. Opsimer after a lot of others had talked. Okay, we reached a consensus. We'll ask our staff not to proceed for the next 2 weeks. I don't think we need a motion on it. I think that's just fine. We'll now move on to 13B, the Halloween options. Manager, do we have somebody on the hook for this?
We do. Director Maisner and Chief Plaga have been working on this. Just to kind of condense everything down, the recommendation of the staff, if there is one, is that we really don't do anything in regarding to Halloween except for follow CDC guidelines, follow the health department, and people will make individual choices. Beyond that discussion, unless the board wants to intervene somehow on the Halloween, the only other discussion to have is Director Maisner's been working in her creative mind on some concepts for Halloween that we could somehow put together. And I know Supervisor Steik has asked us to do that. So I don't know if you want to start with Director Maisner and the ideas that they have, but other than that, we're not asking the board to, cut down hours, to get involved in no Halloween trick-or-treating and all of that. Leave it up to the professionals on that. We're here to just talk about creative ideas, unless you have a different direction you want to go. So I would ask Director Maisner to talk about her creative ideas.
Yeah, when I first brought this up, I brought it up from the point of view that it's likely that
And it looks like Supervisor Steik is still continuing to have problems with his internet connection.
some families Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Now,
Okay. When I brought this up, can you hear still?
I can hear you.
I brought this up originally because I thought some families may be reluctant to send their children out, others may be reluctant.
Mr. Supervisor, you might want to try turning your video off and seeing if that can help establish a better connection. Okay, so while we're waiting on Supervisor Steika's connection, why don't we have Director Maisner go over her creative options that she has presented to the board in the memorandum.
great, thank you. As you know, in years past, the township as a whole has done a great job of celebrating Halloween. I know Home TV has had activities. Our police department has an open house. The fire department has an open house. And Harris Nature Center has had an amazing event as well. I think that brought in around 900 people for hay rides and all sorts of pumpkin decorating and those types of things. So whenever we offer things to the community, it is hugely and widely accepted. But during this time, I think we just still need to be very careful about gathering people together. And so we've come up with a few ideas for virtual celebrations with like a costume contest and pumpkin carving and house decorating. And there could be drawings where maybe we could purchase gift cards from local businesses like Cheesy D's and some of those types of restaurants and businesses in the community to give out in a drawing. So it wouldn't necessarily be voting on best, but just anyone who participates would be put in for a drawing. And then we could post those things on social media and work with our communications department. And as far as any in-person activities, in the past, we've done a Halloween party at the small dog park. It's been successful. We just opened the large dog park on October 1st. And so we were thinking of maybe a Halloween event for our ribbon cutting. But at this point, Mike Devlin is off on extended sick leave right now. So I'm not sure where we stand with being able to even accomplish the Halloween events at the dog parks. We're going to sit tight on that for about another week. I know there was talk about maybe doing some type of a celebration at Marketplace on the Green. Halloween is on a Saturday that coincides with our farmers market. We've already been receiving around attendance of 2,000 to 3,000 people on a Saturday. So to advertise and bring in additional, Halloween celebration at the market could really create a huge gathering that would be something that we probably wouldn't want to move forward with. I know there's been a suggestion of maybe just asking our vendors to stick around for an extra hour and let kids come and trick or treat there, but I'm not getting very positive response from that from our vendors at this point. But so I just think we really try to stick with more virtual activities this year as far as offering any program, quote unquote, for Halloween right now. And then we'll still try to do something at our dog parks. But that's still up in the air right now as well.
All right, questions and thoughts and comments from board members. Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Director Maisner. You've clearly put some thought into this, and we've had to cancel so many things this year, and it's disheartening. And I appreciate all the thought you did put into it, but I would concur as a public health professional that I just am uncomfortable doing any, in-person group activities. And I think you've come up with some great ideas that we could do virtually. And there's probably more ideas out there that other townships are doing, but I would 100% support based on, CDC recommendations, MDHHS recommendations, and even, Ingham County Officer Vale has also indicated that, we want to take precautions and everyday changes. So I would just say that I would support and certainly contribute to any brainstorming for any virtual activities that you might do, and certainly participate.
I'm sorry, Treasurer DeShane, go ahead.
I would agree with Trustee Wazinski. We need to follow the public health recommendations on this, which is traditional trick or treating really should not happen this year. But that's not our call. It's not our holiday. It's a holiday that people celebrate kind of on their own. It's going to be up to every family in Meridian Township to make that call, and neighborhoods to decide on how they're going to participate. But as a board, we have no role, nor should we have a role, except to encourage people to follow the public health guidelines. It's really, at the same time, a very sad thing to think there will be no Halloween or very different Halloween this year than past years. We've all paid a huge price for this pandemic. And who would have thought in March that we knew in March this was bad, but who would have thought then that Halloween would be canceled, and that moving into the fall, we're really no better shape than we were 6 months ago. This pandemic has not come under control yet. And until it is, we really can't resume life as we've known it. And that's a loss for everyone here, and certainly a loss for the children in our community as well. I'm going to ask them to sacrifice as well, because we've got to, because their lives are at stake. Everyone's life is at stake with this very deadly coronavirus. So sad as it is, we've got to listen to the public health advice on Halloween. That's all I have.
Other board member comments or questions? Not seeing any at the moment. Trustee Wazinski.
Just a follow-up comment that, that Treasurer DeShane, you're right. I mean, people are gonna do what they're gonna do. We can't really call off Halloween, but if we can encourage people to participate in these virtual events and it have something fun for them to do, hopefully that will encourage people to stay home and stay safe. So, just wanted to throw that out there.
Trustee Wazinski, any other board member comments or thoughts? Seeing none, Director Maisner, I would just share the one thought that I had in reviewing this. With the proposed Halloween at the marketplace on the green, can we ask that our vendors pre-bag those so that they can do a contactless kind of pickup, like each, the bags could be spaced out at the vendor station, and so the kids can just kind of take their bag and walk away rather than using bowls or other distribution methods that we often see.
Right. I'm guessing that our vendors will have something to give away to the customers when they purchase things. We weren't, I guess after we put this together, I didn't know if we really wanted to encourage like visitation for trick or treating at the market this year after this went out. So, we'll probably have some candy that will be bagged there for the customers, but I caution maybe advertising a big Halloween event. I think traditionally we always have had some candy there and cider and donuts. We've had that type of a setting going on, but I don't really foresee much of that taking place this year.
Yeah, I would
But
concur.
if we do, it will be pre-bagged. It won't just be like put your hand in a bowl and grab it out.
I definitely concur, and I think it's best not to advertise it or promote it in any way, but being on Halloween, some vendors are going to bring their candy, so your foresight, I think, is spot on. Let's just make sure that they're cognizant and following CDC guidelines when they do kind of commingle the Saturday farmers market with Halloween.
No, Trustee Opsma, I totally agree, and that's a good suggestion that we'll pass on to our vendors as well, because it was probably, in the past, much more casual. And no, this year, I think we need to be a little more deliberate with how we're going to do that. So we'll definitely have a conversation with our vendors. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Maisner. Supervisor Stika, do we have you?
For at least one moment. I assume the conversation has gone well. Can you sum up where we are?
I'll summarize it as we have gone through our discussion on the Halloween event options for 2020 that Director Maisner has proposed. We had a couple of questions and thoughts, but by and large, the board there appears to be consensus for the direction that Director Maisner is taking us in. Condolences that we're not going to be able to celebrate yet another holiday in a traditional sense.
Understood. All right, well, I guess we're then ready to move on to comments from the public. Mr. Geeves?
We, of course, can take telephone calls at 517-349-1232. Or if you choose to do so, you can use the raise hand feature inside the Zoom interface, and we can enable you to speak inside the meeting itself. I see no hands going up, and there are no telephone calls ringing, sir.
Okay. Luann had her hand up. I'm not sure why.
I did, just because I wanted to speak to the ribbon cutting for Marketplace on the Green tomorrow. And I know there was a question earlier in the meeting from Trustee Wazinski. Just to clarify, this has been a little challenging to coordinate this, because it certainly isn't the celebration that we were intending on making for the grand opening of Marketplace on the Green. But the invitation list is all of the park commissioners, all of the township board members. We do have some elected officials, all of the department heads, the M team members, and then also one member of each of the donating organizations are invited. And so that's who, and that is about 45 to 50 people. And then also our Farmers Market Advisory Board. Now the Wednesday market will be taking place, so we will have some vendors under the pavilion, so it won't be a ribbon cutting to an empty pavilion. So there will be some folks roaming around from that. Our communications team will be taping this live to Facebook. And then also they're going to tape it as well. And then if there are people who would like to just submit comments, and I'm thinking of maybe our partners with CBL Properties out of Tennessee. They probably will not be making the trip here, but they will send a video message. And our communications team plans to put a video together for replay later on. That will probably include my staff in their vegetable costumes when we were going through the fundraising portion of this whole thing. And then moving it through the construction phases with some photos, and then the actual ribbon cutting, and then comments from others who were not able to attend. So that is the plan. Probably a 30-minute program for tomorrow, but we need to do something just to commemorate the opening of Marketplace on the Green. And then we're looking at next year then having a much larger celebration.
Thank you. Yes, Treasurer DeShane. I assume we're into final board comments at this point.
Yes, we are. What I'll use this as a question to Director Maisner. For the remainder of the year, are you planning on moving the existing farmers market vendors into the new pavilions?
Our Wednesday market for sure will move there. Our Saturday market, you know, it is a huge facility, but when the market was designed, we weren't really familiar with COVID yet. And so our market is quite large, and we've done a really great job of spacing our vendors and keeping nice wide aisles for our customers. So we are cautiously trying to figure out if we can still move into the market for the Saturday market quite yet, and still be able to maintain our distancing. So we are looking into that. So getting our Wednesday market in there just to kind of get a feel for what that is. And then we'll have to look at, do some of the vendors go in and some still stay out? And then also our indoor market for the indoor market that would be in the mall in the wintertime, we are taking a look at reconsidering that as well. And maybe extending the outdoor market through December, and then taking a pause in January, February, and come back sometime in March. So there would still be almost the same amount of market days throughout the year. It would just be outdoors. Which seems really odd for us because we've never really had an outdoor market in that cold of temperatures. But from my understanding, Ann Arbor has an outdoor market all winter long. And so it's, for some of our vendors, it's quite common. So that's something that we're looking at probably moving to, is extending our outdoor market through mid-December. In which case we would go under the pavilion because we won't have as many vendors that show up later in the year as they do right now.
Thank you.
Okay, other board members for final comments? I have a question. You may have mentioned it earlier, Luann, in terms of the ribbon cutting. I assume we're going to be having distancing and masking for all the participants.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Then I guess we're ready to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Moved by Opsmer,
Support.
supported by Jackson. Those in favor, just wave your hand. Kathy, are you adjourning? We're adjourning. Thank you.